Welcome to a story that will restore your faith in destiny and challenge everything you believe about second chances. I'm Oprah Winfrey, and in all my years of hosting this show, few stories have moved me as deeply as what you're about to hear. Today, we re-exploring one of the most extraordinary coincidences I've ever encountered, a story that proves that sometimes, when we least expect it, life gives us exactly what we need most. Imagine being a single mother, struggling every day to provide for your sick child, working multiple jobs just to afford basic medical care. Imagine rushing to the hospital in the middle of the night, your child's life hanging in the balance, and discovering that the doctor who holds your child's fate in his hands is the same man who abandoned you when you were pregnant 8 years ago. Now imagine discovering that this abandonment wasn't what you thought it was, that for 8 years, both of you have been victims of a deception so cruel and calculated that it robbed a father of knowing his son and a son of knowing his father. This isn't a movie script or a fairy tale. This is the incredible true story of Carmen Ruiz from Madrid, Spain, and how one night of medical emergency revealed family secrets that had been hidden for nearly a decade. It's a story about love, loss, prejudice, and the extraordinary power of truth to heal even the deepest wounds. Let me tell you about Carmen Ruiz, a woman whose strength and determination would inspire anyone facing impossible circumstances. At 29, Carmen has lived more challenges than most people face in a lifetime, but she has faced them all with grace, dignity, and an unwavering love for her son that has sustained her through the darkest moments. Carmen was just 21 when she fell in love with Alejandro Vega, a medical student from a wealthy Madrid family. Their relationship was passionate and intense, filled with dreams of a future together. Carmen was studying to be a teacher, working part-time jobs to pay for her education, while Alejandro was in his final years of medical school, supported entirely by his affluent family. When Carmen discovered she was pregnant, she was initially terrified but ultimately excited. She and Alejandro had talked about marriage, about building a life together, and she believed that a baby would bring them closer. She waited for the perfect moment to tell him, planning a romantic dinner where she would share the news that would change both their lives forever. Alejandro's reaction was nothing like what Carmen had imagined. Instead of joy or even surprise, his face filled with anger and accusation. He told her she was trying to trap him, that she had gotten pregnant on purpose to force him into marriage and financial responsibility. He accused her of being calculating and manipulative, of trying to destroy his medical career before it had even begun. "You plan this," he told her, his voice cold and unfamiliar. "You think you can tie me down with a baby, but you're wrong. I'm not ready to be a father, and I am certainly not ready to be tied to someone who would use pregnancy as a weapon." Carmen was devastated, not just by his rejection, but by his complete mischaracterization of who she was and what their relationship had meant. She tried to explain that the pregnancy was unplanned, that she had never intended to trap him, that she loved him and wanted to build a family together out of love, not manipulation. But Alejandro had already made up his mind. Within a week, he had disappeared from her life completely. He stopped answering her calls, stopped coming to the places they used to meet, and when Carmen went to his apartment, She discovered he had moved out without leaving a forwarding address. Carmen spent months trying to reach him. She wrote letters to his family's address, called the hospital where he was doing his residency, even reached out to mutual friends, but every attempt was met with silence. It was as if Alejandro Vega had simply vanished from the earth, leaving Carmen to face pregnancy, childbirth, and motherhood completely alone. Diego was born with a congenital heart defect that required immediate surgery and ongoing medical care. Carmen, now a single mother at 22, found herself navigating the complex world of pediatric cardiology, insurance claims, and medical bills that exceeded her annual salary. She dropped out of her teaching program and took multiple jobs, cleaning offices at night, working in a restaurant during the day, doing whatever was necessary to afford Diego's medical care. For 7 years, Carmen built a life around Diego's needs. Every decision was made with his health in mind. Every sacrifice was worth it if it meant giving him the best possible chance at a normal life. She never dated, never considered remarrying, never even took time for friendships or hobbies. Her entire world revolved around being the mother Diego needed and deserved. But Carmen never stopped wondering about Alejandro, not because she wanted him back, but because Diego had a right to know his father, and she couldn't understand how someone could completely abandon their own child. She continued to send occasional letters to the address she had for his family, updating Alejandro about Diego's health, his milestones, his personality. She never received a single response. At 3 a.m. on a cold February night in Madrid, Carmen's life changed forever. Diego had been having a good week. His energy was up, his color was good, and Carmen had allowed herself to hope that maybe, finally, his condition was stabilizing. But cardiac conditions in children are unpredictable, and that night, Diego's heart began to fail in ways that terrified Carmen. Diego woke up struggling to breathe, his lips blue, his little hands clutching his chest. Carmen had seen these symptoms before, but never this severe, never this sudden. She called an ambulance, but in Madrid's late-night traffic, she knew it would be faster to drive Diego to the hospital herself. Hospital La Paz was the only facility in the area with a pediatric cardiology unit available at night. Carmen had been there before with Diego, but always during regular hours, always with appointments and preparation. Racing through the empty corridors with Diego unconscious in her arms, Carmen felt more alone and terrified than she had ever felt in her life. The emergency room was busy despite the late hour, but when the triage nurse saw Diego's condition, they were immediately rushed into a trauma bay. Carmen found herself surrounded by medical equipment, nurses asking rapid-fire questions about Diego's medical history, medications, and previous treatments. "We need the cardiologist on call," one of the nurses said urgently. "This child needs immediate intervention." Carmen held Diego's hand, whispering prayers and promises, telling him to fight, to stay with her, that everything would be okay. She had no idea that the doctor who would determine her son's fate was someone whose face she knew better than her own reflection. When Dr. Alejandro Vega walked into that trauma bay, focused entirely on the medical emergency before him, neither he nor Carmen were prepared for the shock of recognition that would change all their lives forever. Alejandro's first priority was Diego's condition, reading monitors, ordering tests, making the rapid decisions that could mean the difference between life and death. But as he worked, something about the child's mother caught his attention. Her voice was familiar. Her face triggered memories he had tried to bury for years. When their eyes met across Diego's hospital bed, time stopped. 8 years of separation, anger, and unanswered questions crystallized into a moment of recognition so powerful that both Carmen and Alejandro forgot, for just an instant, where they were and why they were there. "Carmen?" Alejandro whispered, his professional composure cracking for just a moment. "You know each other?" the nurse asked, noticing the tension in the room. Carmen couldn't speak. The man she had spent 8 years trying to contact, the father of the child whose life was now in his hands, was standing 3 feet away from her, wearing a white coat and the authority of someone who could save or lose the son he had never acknowledged. "We need to focus on the patient," Alejandro said, recovering his professional demeanor. But Carmen could see the questions in his eyes, the confusion, the shock of coincidence that seemed too impossible to be real. "What do you think when the person who abandoned you becomes the person your child's life depends on? How do you separate personal history from medical emergency when your son's heart is failing and your son's father is the only one who can save him?" Thank you so much for staying with us through this incredible and emotional journey. I know this story is intense, but I promise you the most surprising and heartwarming revelations are still ahead of us. As Alejandro worked to stabilize Diego's heart, he couldn't ignore the growing certainty that this child was connected to him in ways that went far beyond the doctor-patient relationship. Diego's facial features, his bone structure, even his hair color and texture were eerily familiar. But it was Diego's eyes, the same unusual hazel green that Alejandro saw in his own reflection, that made the connection undeniable. The medical emergency required Alejandro's complete focus. Diego needed immediate cardiac catheterization to determine the extent of the current crisis and decide whether emergency surgery would be necessary. Throughout the procedure, Alejandro maintained his professional composure, but Carmen could see the questions building in his expression every time he looked at Diego's face. When Diego was finally stabilized and resting in the cardiac intensive care unit, Alejandro approached Carmen in the family waiting area. The conversation that followed would unravel 8 years of assumptions, hurt, and misunderstanding. "Carmen," Alejandro said quietly, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Is Diego my son?" Carmen looked at this man who had abandoned her when she needed him most, who had disappeared from her life so completely that she had wondered if he had ever really loved her at all. The anger and hurt of 8 years rose in her throat, but Diego's condition made everything else secondary. "Yes," she said simply. "Diego is your son who you abandoned before he was even born. Your son who has spent 7 years fighting for his life, while you built your career and pretended we didn't exist." Alejandro's reaction was not what Carmen expected. Instead of defensiveness or denial, his face showed genuine shock and confusion. "Carmen, I swear to you, I had no idea. I never knew you had the baby. I never knew I had a son. I thought, when you stopped trying to contact me, I assumed you had decided not to have the child, or that you had moved on with your life." Carmen stared at him in disbelief. "Stopped trying to contact you?" Alejandro, I wrote you letters for years. I called the hospital. I contacted your friends. I even wrote to your mother. I never stopped trying to tell you about Diego. You ignored every single attempt I made to reach you. The confusion on Alejandro's face was genuine and troubling. Carmen, I never received any letters. I never got any calls. I moved to London for 2 years to complete a fellowship, but I've been back in Madrid for 3 years. If you had tried to contact me at the hospital, they would have found a way to reach me. As they talked, a horrifying possibility began to emerge. Carmen described the letters she had sent to his family's address, the calls she had made to numbers she thought were his, the desperate attempts to reach him that had all been met with silence. Alejandro described his own confusion about why Carmen had never tried to contact him after their argument, his assumption that she had chosen to handle the pregnancy without him. Carmen, Alejandro said slowly, I think someone has been intercepting your communications. Someone who didn't want us to have contact with each other. The realization hit both of them simultaneously. Alejandro's mother, Dona Isabel Vega, had never approved of Carmen. She had made her feelings clear during the few times they had met. Carmen was too young, too poor, too common for her son. Isabel had grand plans for Alejandro's future, plans that included marriage to someone from their own social circle, someone who could enhance rather than complicate his medical career. My mother, Alejandro whispered. My mother knew. She's been getting your letters, blocking your calls. She's known about Diego for years and never told me. The betrayal was staggering in its scope and cruelty. For 8 years, Isabel had allowed her son to believe that Carmen had simply moved on, while simultaneously preventing Carmen from having any contact with the father of her child. She had robbed Diego of his father, robbed Alejandro of his son, and robbed Carmen of the support she desperately needed during the most challenging years of her life. But the most devastating realization was yet to come. Isabel hadn't just hidden. Carmen set communications. She had been actively monitoring Diego's medical condition and had never once suggested that Alejandro might want to help his own son. The confrontation with Dona Isabel Vega was one of the most difficult conversations I've ever facilitated on this show. Isabel, an elegant woman in her 60s from one of Madrid's most prominent families, agreed to appear only after Alejandro threatened to cut all contact with her if she didn't explain her actions. Isabel's justification for her 8-year deception revealed the depth of her prejudice and the extent to which she had prioritized her own social expectations over her son's happiness and her grandson's welfare. I protected my son's future, Isabel said with no trace of remorse. Carmen was a distraction, a mistake that would have derailed everything Alejandro had worked for. He was meant for greater things than being trapped by an unplanned pregnancy with a girl from a working-class family. When confronted with the evidence of Carmen's letters, dozens of them, saved in a box in Isabel's home, Isabel showed no shame about intercepting them. I read every single letter, she admitted. I knew about the child's condition, his surgeries, his struggles. But Alejandro was building his career. He didn't need the complication of a sick child and a demanding mother. The cruelty of Isabel's words was breathtaking, but what made her actions even more unforgivable was the revelation that she had been using her wealth and connections to monitor Diego's condition without ever helping. I made sure the child received adequate medical care, Isabel said, as if this justified her actions. I made anonymous donations to the hospital. I ensured that he was seen by competent doctors. I wasn't heartless. I just didn't want Alejandro's life complicated by unnecessary drama. Carmen's response to this revelation was raw and powerful. Unnecessary drama? Your grandson fighting for his life was unnecessary drama? Me working 3 jobs to pay for his medical care while you sat in comfort knowing exactly what we were going through. That was preventing drama? But the most devastating moment came when Alejandro confronted his mother about the impact of her deception on his relationship with his son. You stole 8 years from me, Alejandro told Isabel, his voice breaking with emotion. 8 years of my son's life that I can never get back. His first words, his first steps, his first day of school, every surgery he endured alone. You decided I didn't deserve to be there for any of it. Isabel's defense revealed the complete disconnect between her perception and reality. I saved you 8 years of financial burden and emotional complications. You're a successful cardiologist now because you were distracted by family obligations you weren't ready for. The irony of Isabel's logic was staggering. She had protected her son from becoming a father so he could become a pediatric cardiologist, never considering that knowing about Diego might have inspired rather than hindered his medical career. When confronted with the question of whether she felt any guilt about Diego's medical struggles, Isabel's response showed the full extent of her emotional detachment. The child received medical care. His condition is genetic, not something that money or a father's presence could have prevented. But Carmen had kept every medical record, every doctor's note, every insurance denial. She presented evidence of the financial strain, the times when Diego's care had been delayed because she couldn't afford certain treatments, the stress-related health problems she had developed from carrying this burden alone. Your grandson needed surgery that was delayed for 6 months because I couldn't pay for it up front, Carmen told Isabel. During those 6 months, his condition worsened. That delay may have permanent consequences for his heart function. You had the power to prevent that suffering, but you chose to let it happen rather than tell your son he had a child who needed him. Alejandro's decision to cut all contact with his mother was immediate and final. You're not my mother anymore, he told Isabel. A mother protects her children and grandchildren. You sacrificed your grandson's health and stole my chance to be a father to protect your social reputation. I can never forgive that. The process of building a relationship between Alejandro, Carmen, and Diego was complicated by years of separation, medical challenges, and the complex emotions that come with discovering family under traumatic circumstances. But what emerged from this reunion was more beautiful than anyone could have expected. Alejandro's first priority was ensuring Diego received the best possible medical care. Using his position at Hospital La Paz and his connections throughout Madrid's medical community, he assembled a team of specialists to give Diego comprehensive treatment for his cardiac condition. The surgery Diego needed, one that Carmen had been trying to afford for over a year, was scheduled immediately, with Alejandro covering all costs. But more than the financial support, Alejandro brought something Diego had been missing his entire life: a father's love and medical expertise combined. Alejandro understood Diego's condition in ways that Carmen, despite her years of advocacy, never could. He could explain Diego's treatment in terms Diego could understand, could provide reassurance based on medical knowledge rather than just hope. The relationship between Carmen and Alejandro was more complex. 8 years of hurt, misunderstanding, and separate lives couldn't be undone overnight. Carmen struggled with anger about the years Alejandro had been absent, even knowing now that the absence wasn't entirely his choice. Alejandro struggled with guilt about the suffering Carmen and Diego had endured while he lived in comfortable ignorance. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Alejandro told Carmen during one of our conversations. "I know that my ignorance doesn't excuse the fact that you and Diego suffered while I wasn't there. I can't give you back the years you struggled alone, but I can make sure that you never have to face Diego's medical needs without support again." Carmen's response showed the grace and wisdom she had developed through years of single motherhood. "I am not ready to forgive you completely, because part of me is still angry about the years we lost. But I'm grateful that Diego finally has his father, and I can see that you love him genuinely. That's what matters now." The most beautiful part of their reunion was watching Diego and Alejandro discover each other. Diego, who had spent his life wondering about his father, was initially shy and cautious around Alejandro. But Alejandro's medical knowledge, combined with his genuine care for Diego's welfare, quickly broke down the barriers. Alejandro started visiting Diego every day, not just as his doctor but as his father. He brought books about cardiology written for children, explained Diego's condition in terms that made Diego feel smart and informed rather than scared and confused. He attended Diego's school events, met with his teachers, and became the father presence Diego had always needed. The surgery to repair Diego's heart defect was successful, performed by Alejandro himself with assistance from Spain's top pediatric cardiac surgeons. Having his father as his surgeon gave Diego confidence and comfort that no amount of medical expertise alone could have provided. "My papa is going to fix my heart," Diego told everyone who would listen before the surgery. "He's the best heart doctor in the world, and he's my papa." 6 months after that night in the emergency room, Carmen, Alejandro, and Diego had become a family, not in the traditional sense of a married couple with children, but in the deeper sense of people committed to each other's welfare and happiness. Carmen and Alejandro decided to co-parent Diego while taking time to rediscover each other as adults. 8 years had changed both of them, and they wanted to build any romantic relationship on a foundation of mutual respect and shared commitment to Diego's welfare, rather than rushing into something based on their past connection. Alejandro moved to an apartment near Carmen and Diego's home, making himself available for daily involvement in Diego's life while respecting the boundaries Carmen needed to heal from years of single parenthood. He provided financial support that allowed Carmen to reduce her work hours and return to her education, finally completing the teaching degree she had abandoned when Diego was born. Most importantly, Diego's health improved dramatically with consistent, expert medical care and the emotional stability that came from having both parents actively involved in his life. This story proves that sometimes, when we least expect it, life provides exactly what we need most. Carmen's desperate rush to save Diego, life led her to the one person who could not only provide the medical expertise Diego needed, but also the father's love he had been missing his entire life. But this story is about more than just a miraculous coincidence. It's about the destructive power of prejudice and control, and how one person's fear and snobbery can rob multiple generations of love, support, and connection. Isabel's actions didn't just hurt Carmen and Diego. They robbed Alejandro of 8 years of fatherhood and robbed herself of a relationship with her grandson. This story also demonstrates the healing power of truth and the resilience of family bonds. Despite 8 years of separation, despite the pain and misunderstanding, Carmen, Alejandro, and Diego were able to build a loving, supportive family relationship based on honesty, commitment, and shared love for Diego's welfare. Most importantly, this story shows us that love finds a way. Carmen's love for Diego sustained her through 8 years of single parenthood. Alejandro's love for his son, once he knew Diego existed, motivated him to immediately step up as a father. And Diego's love for both his parents helped heal the wounds that years of separation had created. I want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced a coincidence that seemed too impossible to be real? Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted had been keeping life-changing secrets from you? How do you balance forgiveness with accountability when someone's actions have caused years of unnecessary suffering? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective might help someone else navigate their own family challenges. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories about family, forgiveness, and the power of love to overcome seemingly impossible obstacles. And don't miss our next video, where we explore another family reunion story that proves that it's never too late for love to triumph over the circumstances that have kept families apart. Remember, sometimes the people we've lost are closer than we think, and sometimes the miracles we've been praying for arrive in the most unexpected ways.